censoring or sitting on this film, and the fact is that any responsible agency, police agency, law enforcement, judicial, whatever, who asked for a copy of the film, we gave, with the admonition that that it should not be shown to anyone else. But and we finally were deceived in this respect.
Of course there were other guns there. Of course the fatal shots were fired from the front. There's no question about that, and there's no question about the fact that it can be proved.
Garrison at that point was such a loose cannon by the time the Clayshaw trial occurred that we would not give up the film except by subpoena, which, being the district attorney, needless to say, he supplied promptly. And it is the firm belief of most of us that during that period copies, illegal copies, were made and the bootlegging business began.
I went to Hollywood Valley Film Labs out in the San Fernando Valley, and I walked in and I said, I'd like 100 copies of this, please. It was an 8mm film, and I wanted 100 contact prints. So the guy disappeared into an office, and I guess they were projecting it in there, and the owner of the lab said, will you come in here for a minute? And I said, uh-oh, I'm going to really be in trouble now. And he says, he has it up there on the screen, and he said, do you think Jackie's going out in the trunk because she's trying to run away, or do you think she's trying to, something else is going on, you know?
I became aware of bootleg copies of the Zapruder footage floating around, very poor quality ones. And of course we were all fascinated to see it, you know, and some of us, you know, smoke dope or do whatever and get morose watching it. Many, I think, people who were politically left, we took it very worshipfully. On the other hand, I also heard of less respectful uses of it, intercut with pornographic footage, you know, and whatever.
Bootleg copies were made and distributed through the country, through the underground, but they were very muddy. They were virtually worthless. The only thing you could really see is that when the president is struck in the head, he's thrown to the rear. That's about all you could see. When I started working in the motion picture industry in 1969, I met a most remarkable man in New York who had done some work for Time Incorporated on the Zapruder film, just blown it up to 35mm, and was allowed to keep a what they call a mechanic's copy of the film. Well, he did not have any particular interest in trying to resolve the case himself, but he knew of my interest in the case, and he allowed me to view the film and eventually gave it to me. After he had shown me the film, he allowed me to make optically enhanced copies. I devised some techniques which I used on the Zapruder film and created versions of the film which were actually more important and better evidence than the original film was in its raw state. Once I was able to show it on national television, thanks to Geraldo Rivera, overnight the case was reborn.
Good night, America, a second-generation TV news magazine. Tonight we devote our entire show to a discussion of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy.
When I saw the Zapruder film, when it was shown to me in my studio, it was as if the ancient history became current events. It was a piece of evidence that was so glaring and so crying to be shown to the American people that I decided to risk the lawsuit and go ahead and broadcast it.
I'm telling you right straight out that if you are at all sensitive, if you're at all queasy, then don't watch this film. Just put on the late night movie because this is very heavy. It's the film shot by the Dallas dress manufacturer Abraham Zapruder, and it's the execution of President Kennedy.
Now, before he goes behind the sign, the president is waving to the crowd. When he comes out from behind the sign, he is shot. Then Governor Connolly is shot.
He's already been hit.
He's already been hit. Jackie doesn't realize what's happened yet. She goes to his aid.
And now, that's the shot that blew off his head. It's the most horrifying thing I've ever seen in the movie.
I remember very clearly getting a hostile letter from Time Life stating, in fact, that we had violated the copyright and that Time Life was in no way responsible, and they reserved all their legal remedies to come after us for whatever damages they felt were necessary. I remember also getting calls from the Zapruder family saying, how dare you, essentially. And my position was consistent throughout. It was, sue me. you know, to take the line from the famous musical Guys and Dolls, sue me, shoot bullets through me. I was willing to take the heat because I felt that in any civil litigation, the true story of why that footage had not been broadcast earlier would be uncovered, much to the chagrin and embarrassment of Time Life or whoever else was responsible for, in my view, suppressing it.
We decided at that point that rather than Zapruder himself was dead, his son was a tax lawyer in Washington, and we decided that it would be far more sensible for us to retain print rights, not television and movie rights, foolishly, retain print rights in perpetuity, but otherwise turn the film back to the Zapruder family for whatever use they wanted to make of it, which we did in 1976 for $1.
I think the family is responsible in this sense, that they are freely licensing it. If the family was saying today, we only are going to provide it to people who say that Oswald acted alone, or we're only going to provide it to people who say it was a CIA conspiracy or KGB, and we have our own theory about this, that would be quite offensive. Or we're not going to provide it to Oliver Stone because we don't like the idea of JFK. Instead, what they said is we're equal opportunity providers. If you have the money, you can have the film.
I'm glad the family, the Zapruder family, is permitting the film to come out on CD-ROM, because I think that's going to be the ultimate democratization of all this data. Everybody can take this film on their PC and look at it, frame by frame, and then anybody can see what's happening in the car or with Connolly or Kennedy, and they can argue about it. And I think that's the way it should be.
Perhaps the Zapruder film gives us this feeling of hope, that somewhere in that film lies the answer of what happened to President Kennedy and what happened to America. I would call it false hope. This idea that somehow you can read reality off of a film emulsion, like you can simply look at a map and find your way from one city to another, is just quite simply false. Film is a lie. Film is not a record of absolute truth. It's just another artifact that has, yes, a causal relationship with the real world, but what that exact relationship is often obscure.
I want to tell you, you may not be aware of it yourself, but I want to tell you that your film has been one of the most helpful things to the work of the Commission that we could have possibly have had, because it enables us to study the various positions of the people in the car and to develop with a fair degree of accuracy the facts here.
I understand. I'm willing to be helpful, but I'm sorry it had to be on an occasion like this.
Yes, that's right.
I'm only sorry I broke down. I didn't know I was going to do it.
Mr. Zapruder, I want to thank you very much for the Commission for coming down. It's been very helpful.
I feel ashamed of myself, but it was a tragic thing. And when you started asking me about that, I saw the whole thing all over again. It was an awful thing, and I loved the president. And to see that happen before my eyes, his head opened up and shot down like a dog, it leaves a very, very deep sentimental impression with you. It's terrible.
I think what that film tells us is the randomness of life, of violence. My feeling is one crazed, angry, lonely conspirator shot from that building and killed a very popular president, and with it, a lot of the dreams of this country and, Lord knows, the innocence that remained in America.
I look at it in a far more pragmatic way than I did back in the middle 70s when I first broadcast that footage to the country. Now I think it's one of melancholy and frustration rather than anger. It's one of a kind of wistfulness rather than passion, because I feel that the true story will never be told.
It's often seemed to me that the Kennedy assassination has makes a kind of analogy to Hamlet, that the king is dead, the king is murdered, and there's a mystery surrounding the murder. Yet no Fortinbras has arrived. And the society somehow cannot cleanse itself until something like that happens. And it seems to me that the showing of that brutal film again and again reminds us that we're not clean yet, that there's still something rotten in the state of Denmark, that we still await some conclusion that might free us, you know, from that limousine and that explosion and that sunny day in Dallas.
You begged for this life. Did you think there wasn't a price to pay?
She said that it wasn't her son.
Holy!
Oswald's palm print was lifted from the rifle. When the FBI rushed the rifle to Washington, the palm print stayed in Dallas, and the chain of evidence was broken. The latent fingerprints on the trigger guard were less well defined and have been largely ignored. Vincent Scalise is one of America's leading fingerprint experts.
The FBI examined these latent prints and they determined that they were worthless for identification purposes. I re-examined the photograph of these latent prints again in 1978 for the Select Committee on Assassinations and came to the same conclusion. Due to the faintness of the prints, I determined that they were of no value for identification purposes.
30 years ago, Rusty Livingston was working in the Dallas Police Crime Lab. He developed pictures taken at the scene of the crime, including the rifle and the latent fingerprints on its trigger guard. Livingston made several sets of prints, including one set for himself, which he has kept until now. It now emerges that the full set of fingerprints from the rifle did not go to the FBI in 1963. This long-neglected evidence was recently examined for the first time. When it was, the prints on the trigger guard were found to have 3 positive and 3 possible points of identity. Though not enough for a positive identification, nothing was inconsistent with Oswald's own prints. In an opinion certain to be controversial, Vincent Scalise is now prepared to go much further.
I took the photographs. There were a total of 4 photographs in all. That I began to examine them, I saw 2 faint prints. And as I examined them, I realized that these prints had been taken at different exposures. And it was necessary for me to utilize all of the photographs to compare against the ink prints. As I examined them, I found that by maneuvering the photographs in different positions, I was able to pick up some details on one photograph and some details on another photograph. Using all of the photographs at different contrasts, I was able to find in the neighborhood of about 18 points of identity between the 2 prints. Well, I feel that this is a major breakthrough in this investigation because we're able for the first time to actually say that these are definitely the fingerprints of Lee Harvey Oswald and that they are on the rifle. There is no doubt about it.
The prosecution case against